What if one tree could feed a person for an entire year and we deliberately stopped planting it? Not because it failed, but because it worked too well. In 1943, the United States Department of Agriculture published a wartime survival guide recommending a fruit tree that produced more vitamin C than oranges, stored for 6 months without refrigeration, and fruited for 20 years without replanting. They called it the tree tomato. Within 5 years of the war's end, the USDA had scrubbed it from every official publication. No explanation, no follow-up studies, just silence. We grow tomatoes on the ground because that's what the system requires. Annual planting, annual purchasing, annual dependence. But what if there's a tomato that grows on a 12-foot tree, fruits for 2 decades, and laughs at frost while your garden tomatoes die in September? This is the secret botanist. We don't explore plants, we exhume them. Today we are opening the file on Cyphomandra betaceae, the tree tomato that threatened the subscription model of modern agriculture. The ground tomato is fragile royalty. It demands full sun, rich soil, consistent watering, staking, pruning, and protection from 30 different pest species. It lives for 1 season, 5 months from seed to death. When frost arrives, it dies. When disease strikes, it dies. When you forget to water, it dies. Every spring, you start over. Buy seeds, buy fertilizer, buy stakes, buy pesticides. Repeat annually forever. This is not agriculture. This is a subscription service. You are not growing food. You are renting the privilege of harvesting something that dies on schedule, so you return to purchase inputs again. The tomato industry is worth $2 billion annually in the United States alone. The model works because the plant cooperates by dying. The Tamarillo does not cooperate. It is a small tree reaching 10 to 15 feet at maturity. It produces egg-shaped fruits, 2 to 4 inches long, with smooth, glossy skin in shades of red, yellow, or purple, depending on variety. The fruit tastes like tomato crossed with passion fruit, tangy and sweet simultaneously. But taste is secondary to what the tree does that ground tomatoes cannot. First, it is perennial. Plant it once, and it produces for 12 to 20 years depending on care and climate. No annual replanting, no seed purchases, no starting over every spring. The tree simply grows, fruits, rests, and fruits again year after year. Second, it is cold-hardy relative to ground tomatoes. While frost kills tomato vines instantly, Tamarillo trees survive light frosts and can tolerate temperatures down to 28 degrees Fahrenheit for short periods. In zones 9 through 11, they fruit year-round with peak harvests in late fall and winter, exactly when ground tomatoes are dead or greenhouse-grown at premium prices. Third, it requires almost no maintenance. The tree is drought-tolerant once established. It does not demand staking or intensive pruning. Pests largely ignore it. Fungal diseases that devastate ground tomatoes barely affect Tamarillos. The tree grows, you harvest, and that is the entire relationship. Fourth, and this is where the economic threat becomes undeniable, Tamarillo fruits store for up to 6 months at room temperature due to their thick, waxy skin. No refrigeration required. No canning. No freezing. Just pick the fruit, set it on a shelf, and it remains edible through winter into spring. Ground tomatoes last 1 week before rotting. Do the mathematics. 1 Tamarillo tree produces 30 to 60 pounds of fruit annually once mature. That tree lives for 20 years. That is 600 to 1,200 pounds of fruit per tree over its lifetime from a single planting. Ground tomatoes require replanting every year, fertilizing every season, and protecting constantly. The tree tomato is a one-time investment that delivers for 2 decades. The ground tomato is an annual expense that never ends. For a home gardener, this is liberation. For a seed company, this is extinction. Block 2. The 1943 Victory Garden Scandal. The Tamarillo is native to the Andes, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Bolivia, where it has been cultivated for centuries. Indigenous farmers grew it in high-altitude valleys, valuing it for productivity and storage capacity. Spanish colonizers documented it in the 1500s, noting that the fruit kept through long mountain winters when other fresh food was unavailable. By the late 1800s, Tamarillo had spread to New Zealand, where it became commercially cultivated. New Zealanders called it tree tomato, and by the 1920s, it was a common backyard fruit tree and small-scale commercial crop. It reached California and Florida in the early 1900s, promoted by horticulturalists as a novelty fruit with potential for home gardens. Then came World War II. Suddenly, the United States government was telling citizens to grow as much food as possible. Victory gardens became national policy. Every household with land was encouraged, practically ordered, to produce food to reduce strain on commercial agriculture diverted to feeding troops overseas. The USDA began promoting high-yield, low-maintenance crops that could feed families without extensive farming knowledge. In 1943, the USDA released a series of bulletins on survival fruits, crops that produced substantial yields with minimal inputs and could be stored without refrigeration. The tree tomato appeared prominently in these publications. USDA Bulletin No. 415, titled Emergency Food Crops for Wartime Gardens, specifically recommended Tamarillo for subtropical regions, describing it as a perennial fruit tree capable of feeding a family from a single planting. The bulletin detailed planting instructions, propagation methods, and storage techniques. It emphasized the tree's ability to produce food year after year without replanting, a critical advantage when seed supplies were uncertain and labor was scarce. The USDA distributed Tamarillo seeds and cuttings through agricultural extension offices in California, Florida, and other suitable climates. For a brief period, the tree tomato was official government policy. The war ended in 1945. Within 3 years, USDA Bulletin No. 415 was withdrawn from circulation. No revised edition, no updated guidance. It simply disappeared from Extension Office catalogs and USDA archives. By 1950, Tamarillo had vanished from official agricultural recommendations. Mentions in Extension publications ceased. What changed? The war was over. Victory gardens were no longer needed. A perennial fruit tree that required no annual inputs was incompatible with the business model American agriculture was building. By the 1960s, the tree tomato had been erased so thoroughly that most Americans had never heard of it. It survived in backyard gardens of stubborn immigrants from New Zealand and South America, in botanical gardens as a curiosity, and in scattered subtropical gardens where people remembered or never forgot. But institutionally, commercially, agriculturally, it was gone. The USDA had promoted it as a survival crop during wartime emergency. When the emergency ended and profit became the priority again, survival crops that did not generate recurring revenue were quietly discarded. Tamarillo was not the only victim of this recalculation, but it was among the most nutritionally valuable. The suppression of Tamarillo was not ideological. It was geometric. Modern industrial agriculture is built on straight rows, mechanical harvesting, and annual replanting cycles. Every piece of equipment, every subsidy program, every financing structure assumes crops planted in spring and harvested in fall. The system is optimized for annuals. Perennials disrupt every assumption. Tamarillo trees do not grow in straight rows compatible with mechanical harvesters. They are irregular, branching, and three-dimensional. You cannot drive a combine through a Tamarillo grove. You cannot apply herbicides without killing the trees. You cannot till the soil between trees without damaging root systems. For a small-scale grower or home gardener, this is irrelevant. You plant the tree, you hand-harvest the fruit, and the lack of mechanical compatibility does not matter. But for commercial agriculture structured around equipment, scale, and standardization, Tamarillo is incompatible. If it cannot be mechanized, it cannot be industrialized. Then there is the seed problem. Tamarillo is typically propagated from cuttings, not seeds. While it can be grown from seed, cuttings are faster and more reliable, producing fruiting trees in 18 months versus 3 years from seed. This means farmers do not need to purchase seeds annually. One established tree can provide cuttings indefinitely. You buy once, or more likely, you get a cutting from a neighbor and you never buy again. For seed companies, this is catastrophic. The entire business model of annual vegetable seeds depends on crops dying and requiring repurchase. Tomato seeds are sold every spring to millions of gardeners and farmers. Tamarillo cuttings are shared once and propagated forever. There is no recurring revenue. There is no annual market. Fertilizer companies face the same problem. Ground tomatoes are heavy feeders, demanding nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium throughout the growing season. Tamarillo trees are light feeders, requiring minimal fertilization once established. Their deep roots access nutrients ground tomatoes cannot reach. They fix their own fertility through leaf litter and root turnover. Selling fertilizer to Tamarillo growers is like selling ice to Eskimos. The customer does not need the product. Pesticide companies lose too. Ground tomatoes are vulnerable to aphids, hornworms, whiteflies, blight, wilt, blossom end rot, and a dozen other pests and diseases. Tamarillo is remarkably pest-resistant. The thick, waxy skin deters most insects. The tree's natural chemistry repels many common pests. Fungal diseases that destroy tomato crops barely touch Tamarillos. A plant that does not get sick cannot be sold pesticides. By the 1950s, American agriculture had fully committed to the industrial model. Subsidies flowed to commodity crops. Research funding went to improving yields of corn, wheat, and soybeans. Extension services taught farmers to think in terms of annual planting cycles and chemical inputs. The entire institutional structure was designed to favor crops that fit the equipment, required the chemicals, and died on schedule. Tamarillo fit none of these criteria. It was perennial, which meant no annual seed sales. It was pest-resistant, which meant no pesticide sales. It was low maintenance, which meant no fertilizer sales. It was hand-harvested, which meant no equipment sales. From an industrial agriculture perspective, Tamarillo was economically useless, not because it did not produce food, but because it produced food without generating revenue for input suppliers. The tree was not banned. It was simply made invisible. No research funding, no breeding programs, no commercial promotion. While billions were invested in developing hybrid tomato varieties optimized for mechanical harvesting and long-distance shipping, Tamarillo received nothing. It was relegated to exotic fruit status, a curiosity for hobbyists, not a crop for serious agriculture. But let's examine what was lost when Tamarillo disappeared from American agriculture. Start with the storage capability. A ripe Tamarillo, picked at maturity, can sit on a shelf at room temperature for up to 6 months. Not in a refrigerator, not in a root cellar. On a shelf, in your kitchen, exposed to air. The fruit does not rot. It does not mold. It does not require any preservation technique whatsoever. This is possible because of the skin. Tamarillo fruits have a thick, leathery, waxy epidermis that functions as a natural seal. The skin is nearly impermeable to moisture loss and pathogen entry. The fruit essentially packages itself for long-term storage. Pick it, set it aside, and it remains edible for half a year. Ground tomatoes last 1 week before decomposing into fungal mush. For a household trying to eat fresh produce through winter, this is revolutionary. Harvest Tamarillos in November, and you are eating fresh fruit in April. No canning, no freezing, no dehydrating. Just pick and store. For a food system that prizes shelf-stable products, Tamarillo should have been embraced. Instead, it was discarded in favor of tomatoes bred for shipping durability, which are picked unripe, gassed with ethylene, and sold as fresh despite tasting like wet cardboard. The nutritional comparison is even more damning. Tamarillo contains approximately 35 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams of fruit, comparable to oranges. Ground tomatoes contain approximately 14 milligrams per 100 grams. Tamarillo provides more than double the vitamin C of the fruit it was named after. The Tamarillo never actually disappeared. It retreated to the margins, backyard gardens in California and Florida, immigrant communities from New Zealand and South America. Botanical collections where curators preserved what commercial agriculture discarded. In these places, people who remembered or never forgot continued growing tree tomatoes, harvesting them, eating them, and sharing cuttings with neighbors. And now, slowly, Tamarillo is returning, not through government programs or commercial agriculture, but through gardeners, small-scale growers, and permaculture practitioners who recognized what was lost. Specialty nurseries in California, Florida, and Hawaii now carry Tamarillo trees. Online seed exchanges distribute seeds and cuttings. The information that the USDA erased in 1948 is being reconstructed and shared outside official channels. If you live in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11, coastal California, southern Texas, Florida, Hawaii, you can grow Tamarillo. The tree tolerates light frost but cannot survive prolonged freezing. In Zone 8, It can be grown in containers and brought indoors during winter. The tree is fast-growing, reaching fruiting maturity in 18 to 24 months from cuttings, 3 years from seed. Tamarillo prefers well-drained soil and full sun, but tolerates partial shade. It is drought-tolerant once established, but produces more fruit with consistent moisture. The tree benefits from occasional pruning to maintain shape and encourage branching, but it is not labor-intensive. Pests are minimal. Diseases are rare. It is, by any measure, an easy tree to grow. Propagation from cuttings is simple. Take a 12-inch cutting from a healthy tree in late winter or early spring. Remove lower leaves. Dip the cut end in rooting hormone if available, or willow water if you have been paying attention, and plant in well-draining potting mix. Keep moist and warm. Roots develop within 4 to 6 weeks. The cutting becomes a fruiting tree within 18 months. Seeds are available through specialty seed companies and online exchanges. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, Rare Seeds, and several permaculture-focused suppliers carry Tamarillo seeds. The variety Goldmine produces yellow-orange fruits with sweeter flavor. The variety Oritia Red produces deep red fruits with more intense flavor. Both are productive and reliable. The cost of establishing a Tamarillo grove is the price of trees or seeds, typically $15 to $30 per plant from nurseries, $5 to $10 for seed packets. Once planted, the ongoing cost is effectively zero. No annual seeds, no fertilizers, no pesticides, just water, occasional pruning, and harvesting. For a household, 3 trees provide abundant fruit for fresh eating, cooking, and sharing. For a small-scale market grower, 20 to 30 trees can generate significant income from farmers markets and specialty grocers where Tamarillo sells for $4 to $8 per pound. The fruit is harvested when the skin turns fully colored, red, yellow, or purple depending on variety, and the fruit softens slightly. It will continue ripening after picking. Store at room temperature. The skin becomes slightly wrinkled as the fruit ages, but the flesh remains edible for months. To eat, cut the fruit in half and scoop out the flesh with a spoon, discarding the bitter skin. When you pick a fresh Tamarillo in January, while your neighbors are buying greenhouse tomatoes shipped from Mexico, you participate in a quiet rebellion. You demonstrate that food can exist outside the annual cycle. You prove that perennials work. You opt out of the subscription model. You remember what the USDA wanted you to forget. The tree tomato was erased because it succeeded too well at feeding people without creating dependence. It produced too much for too long with too little input. It stored too effectively. It required too few purchases. In a food system built on scarcity and recurring sales, abundance is not celebrated. It is suppressed. You have a choice. You can continue buying annual tomato seeds and fertilizers and pesticides every spring, or you can plant a tree that produces for 20 years and ask why no one told you it existed. The tree works. The fruit stores. The system lied. The only question is whether you are willing to grow something that refuses to die on schedule. In 1943, the USDA called Tamarillo a survival crop. They were correct. But survival in this context does not mean barely getting by. It means thriving outside the system that requires you to purchase survival every season. The tree tomato survives by making you independent. And independence is what the system cannot tolerate. If this file changed how you see the tomatoes dying in your garden every September, subscribe to The Secret Botanist. We are excavating the perennials they replaced with subscriptions. The next excavation reveals which tree was removed from USDA forestry programs in 1967 because it produced too much free lumber. Some crops were erased because they failed. Some were erased because they succeeded without requiring you to return to the store. The botanical evidence does not lie. The tree tomatoes are still fruiting in January. What you choose to plant determines which system you feed.